Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak Europe podcast, available every morning on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. It's Thursday, the 30th of January in London. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Coming up today, an American Airlines regional jet collides midair with a US Army helicopter over Washington, D.C.
Jerome Powell says the Federal Reserve doesn't need to be in a hurry to lower interest rates as the central bank holds steady at its latest meeting.
Plus, a really big year in AI. Meta gains as Mark Zuckerberg makes the case for big investment after a volatile week for the sector.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories. An American Airlines regional airplane with 64 people on board has crashed with a military helicopter in the skies over Washington, D.C. A search and rescue operation is underway and focused on the Potomac River next to Reagan National Airport, where the plane was due to land. Here's what one eyewitness told local television WUSA 9.
We noticed the planes started having regular patterns, and they all kind of dispersed from their regular landing patterns. And then we looked up in the sky before that, and we saw these white flare.
What were you thinking when you saw these white flares?
We didn't think much of it. We thought they were like shooting stars. I don't know. I couldn't really explain it, but we didn't really think much of it until we saw the fire trucks start going out to the tarmac and the police cars and the police boats. It was insane. It was really insane.
An eyewitness speaking to WUSA 9. CBS is reporting that 18 bodies have been recovered so far. Here is the Washington, D.C. Mayor, Muriel Bowser.
Both aircraft are in the water. The focus now is rescuing people, and that's what all of our personnel are focused on.
Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser speaking there. In a statement, the Federal Aviation Administration said the plane, operated by American Airlines subsidiary PSA Airlines, collided with a Sikorsky H-60 Black Hawk helicopter whilst on approach to Reagan Airport at around 9 p.m. local time.
American Airlines says the flight departed from Wichita in Kansas with 60 passengers and 4 crew on board. Military officials have told Bloomberg there were 3 airmen on board the military helicopter, which was travelling from Fort Belvoir in Virginia. In a video statement, American Airlines CEO Robert Isom said the airline is working with emergency responders.
First and most importantly, I'd like to express our deep sorrow about these events. This is a difficult day for all of us at American Airlines, and our efforts now are focused entirely on the needs of our passengers, crew members, partners, first responders, along with their families and loved ones.
American Airlines CEO Robert Isom offering his first thoughts there on the crash. The National Transportation Safety Board says they have sent a rapid response air accident investigation team to the site close to Reagan Airport where the mid-air collision occurred. President Donald Trump criticised events in the run-up to the collision in a Truth Social post, calling it a bad situation that looks like it should have been prevented. Meanwhile, Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth says an investigation is already underway.
Now, let's turn to other news this morning. Deutsche Bank's fixed trading division just posted its best fourth quarter on record. Fixed income commodity currency revenue was up 26%, beating the estimate of 17%. CFO James von Moltke says it's a pattern that runs through every part of the bank.
All of the businesses were up: rates, credit, FX, and emerging markets. So really broad-based strength in a market that where there was a lot of movement, frankly. The geopolitical events, sort of shifts in economic tides, rate changes, all of those things were playing through. The first few weeks of the year have demonstrated a continuation of those trends from the fourth quarter. So we're encouraged by that.
Deutsche Bank CFO James von Moltke speaking there. The bank adds that it plans to actively reduce management layers in areas which don't improve efficiency going forwards.
In other earnings news in Europe, the Spanish lender BBVA posted a fourth quarter net income well above expectations of €2.43 billion, pushing full year profit above €10 billion for the first time ever. Nordea Bank, meanwhile, reporting a slightly better than expected net interest income of €1.85 billion in the fourth quarter. And the numbers from Shell showing them announcing a share buyback program of $3.5 billion. Shell's fourth quarter adjusted profit, though, did miss expectations, coming coming in at just shy of $3.7 billion. The expectations had been for numbers of $4.4 billion. One other big share buyback to bring to your attention, and that is from Sanofi announcing a €5 billion share buyback this year.
Now, Fed Chair Jerome Powell says that the US central bank will wait for further evidence of cooling inflation before adjusting interest rates again. The comments come after policymakers voted unanimously to keep the benchmark rate on hold. Powell says that they want to see what policies the Trump administration will enact.
We don't know what will happen with tariffs, with immigration, with fiscal policy, and with regulatory policy. We're only just beginning to see, actually are not really beginning to see much. And I think we need to let those policies be articulated before we can even begin to make a plausible assessment of what their implications for the economy will be.
After Powell's press conference, President Trump posted online that the Fed chair had, quote, done a terrible job on banking regulation and inflation. The new president has been a frequent critic of the central bank, saying that he understands interest rates better than Powell.
Meta shares rose in after-hours trading after CEO Mark Zuckerberg predicted a really big year for AI. The Facebook founder says he hopes Meta's AI assistant will become the most widely used in the industry.
This is going to be a really big year. Most of our long-term initiatives is going to be a lot clearer by the end of this year. In AI, I expect that this is going to be the year when a highly intelligent and personalized AI assistant reaches more than 1 billion people, and I expect Meta AI to be that leading AI assistant.
Zuckerberg's remarks sent Meta shares up as much as 4.5% in extended trading. The CEO told investors he believes Meta will eventually spend hundreds of billions of dollars on AI infrastructure.
Those are some of our top stories. Let's look at the markets for you this morning as we are digesting a whole slew of earnings from Shell, from Deutsche Bank and others. European stock futures are positive, up by 0.3%. We had a mixed bag of reports out of the US. Last night, IBM, Meta, Microsoft, Tesla. They didn't give a firm direction, but we did see some gains in Asia this morning. The MSCI Asia Pacific Index up by almost 0.2%, although thin liquidity given that the Lunar New Year holiday is ongoing there. Just thinking about what's to come, the ECB rate decision, we're expecting, of course, a quarter-point rate cut. 10-year US yields trading at 4.52, down a basis point. Oil prices are flat. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is down 0.1%. Those are the markets.
In a moment, we'll bring you more details on those big tech results from Meta, Microsoft and others. But first, let's go to our top story this morning and that plane crash in Washington, D.C. A military helicopter colliding with a passenger jet carrying 64 people as it came into land at Reagan National Airport. Our transport reporter Danny Lee joins us now for more. Danny, what do we know about what happened?
Well, this was a catastrophic accident that took place just after 9 p.m. on Wednesday, just outside Reagan National Airport. It's one of Washington's busiest airports, one of the busiest airports, frankly, in the country, given it's so close to a lot of the federal institutions in the nation's capital. And it's a major hub for an American Airlines. And that was a jet subsidiary of the airline that was involved in this midair collision with a U.S. Army helicopter. Now, 64 people, passengers and crew, were on board this commercial jet, and 3 airmen on board this helicopter when this accident took place just over the Potomac River. This plane, this commercial jet, was coming into land at Reagan National Airport. So a very tragic accident and tragic circumstances, given that this helicopter was on a training flight as well. And so right now, what we've heard from officials in the US is the priority is search and rescue. A huge effort has been undertaken, over 300 personnel and obviously lots of resources, including divers, to try and search for people in this very narrow, critical window, this golden hour, as it were, to find any survivors, any signs of life, anyone who potentially is trapped. And divers, in fact, are working in really difficult, very cold, icy conditions. The rivers of the Potomac is about 8 feet deep, but they're muddy, and it is, frankly, very cold. So the focus for officials is to try and find anyone at the moment who may be alive. We don't have any word on survivors or any official number on fatalities, but what we did hear earlier, reported by CBS, was that 18 bodies at least had been pulled from the river, but officials were reluctant to give any kind of detail of whether these were survivors, or these were survivors, anyone who may be classified as dead as such. But this is a catastrophic accident, given it's taking place in the nation's capital as well.
How will the investigation, the air accident investigation, then proceed from here? The focus is obviously on the people involved now, but there will be an investigation which has already begun.
Yeah, the investigation, twin investigation in many ways. First, the priority is for the National Transportation Safety Board to try and ascertain what has happened. They have actually sent a GO team, a rapid response accident investigation team, close to the site where this accident took place. One of the priorities will always be to recover critical pieces of evidence. So that's the so-called black boxes, the flight data recorder, the cockpit voice recorder, and also any, obviously, key wreckage along the way. We'll also clearly want to find any evidence from the helicopter, and we've got the Department of Defense and the Army, as Pete Hegseth, the new Defense Secretary, has said, will be launching an investigation as well. But these federal institutions will be giving support to the NTSB to try and carry out their work. But at the moment, we are still in a bit of a search and rescue phase, and it's going to take a little bit of time before officials move into this state of recovery. And that would obviously mark the fact that they will think there will be no more survivors at this stage. But a lot of recriminations, particularly not just the fact that it happened so close to the likes of where the White House and Congress is situated in DC, but the fact that this exercise in the dead of night, taking place, could have happened and a collision at all. So a very busy piece of airspace ordinarily, but the fact that this has happened is absolutely catastrophic.
Yeah, and of course the airport, as we've been told, remaining closed until 11 a.m. tomorrow. Just worth marking as well that this is very unusual given how active the US air market is. The last commercial jetliner crash was in 2009 in upstate New York. For now, Danny Lee, our transport reporter, thank you very much for bringing us the latest. We
will continue to cover that story for you from Washington DC throughout the morning. It's also, though, a very busy time in terms of earnings that we've had out this week. Let's turn our attention now to some of those. Mark Zuckerberg has promised a really big year for Meta, thanks to artificial intelligence. The social media giant is planning to invest heavily in the technology that has helped to boost shares post-market. Meanwhile, Microsoft fell after it projected slower growth in its cloud business. Matthew Bloxham from Bloomberg Intelligence joins us now for more. Good morning, Matt. Let's start with Meta. There does appear to be, two rival narratives. Disappointing sales forecasts for the current quarter, but then Mark Zuckerberg talking about AI investment. That's a big issue.
Yeah, it's like very much, don't look so much at the near term.
Right.
Look over there.
Focus on the kind of the longer term story and how big AI is going to be. And to be fair, AI is already kind of making a big positive contribution to their business. It's helping them deliver much more effective adverts for their clients. So that's helping propel their ad sales. And also there's kind of the kind of big exciting thing they're talking about is AI assistants and how that's just going to start to kind of really grow. And they're talking about 1 billion or so people using AI assistants, which I think is definitely kind of underpinned by, the adoption of AI into the latest kind of round of smartphones and beyond. So, and I think, people are prepared to kind of buy into that narrative. And, obviously the DeepSeek news has kind of really spooked the markets a bit. But, Meta's still seen as potentially a beneficiary of that. And Zuckerberg was talking up, being complimentary about DeepSeek and saying that they've delivered some novel innovations which they expect to kind of integrate into their own technology in the coming months and years. And Meta's become quite adept at copying other people's products. For example, Instagram and the Reels and such like. So I think people buying into the kind of midterm story and looking through some of the kind of short-term headwinds.
And it's interesting that Mark Zuckerberg did mention or was asked about DeepSeek in that call as well, because that's been a theme that's raised questions around the amount of AI investment these big companies are doing. And it's something that came up with Microsoft as well, warning that it's struggling to build enough data centers to keep up with demand for AI as well. I mean, how is this all playing into Microsoft's earnings?
Yeah, that's right. It was kind of interesting that we saw a slightly different reaction to the Microsoft share price, because the underlying narrative is quite similar, that AI demand is really, really very strong. I think that Microsoft talked about something like $300 billion of kind of order book essentially for committed revenues, and the issue is that they just can't get enough supply for the data centers to kind of book that revenue quicker. So I think it's kind of a good problem to have, if you can kind of describe it as a problem. But it does show, that with all these companies planning to invest tens, if not hundreds of $billions in data center infrastructure, there's not enough supply and resources to go around, and you are seeing this kind of short-term issue, and it, I guess, to some extent squeezes up the cost of building these things. We see that a lot with NVIDIA and how much they're able to charge for their chips, but it goes to the same for all the contractors that actually build the physical data centers and all of the kind of wiring and cabling and cages that go into them, and then delivering the power into those enormous data centers is probably one of the biggest challenges you've got, because you can't just bring power on in the blink of an eye. It can often take years to deliver that power to these data centers.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.